Hey everybody, it's Chris, and today we're looking at the Supreme Escape from Dynamic Discs. This will be their first of the Supreme lineup, which will include the Trespass, the Supreme, the Fugitive, and the Judge. Their first four molds, all reimagined in the Supreme platform, which is similar to the Royal platform for Latitude 64, that new finish process, this new premium plastic. So if you've thrown a Rive, a Grace, or a Glory, it's going to be that plastic, that really super shiny, but really grippy, nice glidey stuff. Now, I did call it a Supreme Escape, and if you look on the bottom of the mold, apologies if it's really bouncy, I left my camera at home. But you can see Supreme Escape there. It is its own mold on PDGA's approved disc list. You will find it as an approved mold for this year. There are a little bit of differences from the regular Escape, mostly the height of the disc. We'll talk about why that was an advantage for me in just a minute. That said, in this video, you're going to see it compared to a lot of different Escapes. I had the Lucid-X Escape in there, but it was too overstable. You get to see it thrown once, but really not a good comparison tool. Chameleon Escape was kind of similar, not as overstable as the Lucid-X, but again, too overstable. So you'll get to see some pre-Sweden Escapes. This is my nice line shaper. It's been one of my main throwers for a few years, so it's a little more understable, or a little straighter than it was when it first came out. I've got a brand new, nearly brand new first run in there, which is going to be a little more overstable. I've got a Fuzion in there that does not get a full airing because a new player was on the course and really clicked with it after he tried it, so I gave it away. You got regular current run Lucid, which was a good comparison tool. And then we've got another disc we need to talk about. If you haven't thrown one of these yet, the Kona Panis Orbit Escapes. This is a great addition to the lineup. It has that nice stiff dome that some of the older Lucid had to make it very comfortable in the hand. Maybe a little bit less overstable. You're going to see it flips up a little bit more, but really good glide. Of all the Escapes I threw, I know this is a Supreme Escape. That one had amazing glide. It'll probably end up in my bag. I'm going to either use it as a turnover disc or try to beat it as a roller. Now, back to the Supreme Escape, which is why we're here. Also, really good glide. In fact, the Kona Panis Orbit Escape is one of them that I used for the most comparisons in here. That's kind of where I stuck this. It wasn't as overstable as the pre-Swedens. It matched up decently with my line shaper, but it was still a little bit less stable, a little bit, how do I phrase that? A little bit more understable than my line shaper. But it still, to me, I thought it was more overstable than the current run of Lucid. Not by a lot, but I thought it felt in between those. So the Fuzion was a good comparison, or the Kona disc was a good comparison. You kind of get to see that in the flights. So that's where I put it stability-wise. Now, I've seen a couple people online say that theirs was more overstable, so it might just be this one that was this understable. Maybe I got a fluky one, which would be weird. But for me, it definitely fell in between current run of Lucid and the pre-Swedens, closer to what the Fuzion or the Kona felt like in flight-wise, or for flight-wise. I think that's about all I've got to say here, but I have a lot of video. So if you have any questions or comments, as always, please put it below so I can get back to you. Watch the flights. I'll try to put some details in there and give good conversation, but I look forward to testing the rest of the Supreme lineup, because if this is an indicator, there are definitely good things to come. So the Supreme Escape, give it a check out, or definitely check it out. This thing flies beautifully. As always, thanks for watching. Bye. All right, although I've covered it up, you can see the biggest difference with that green box is the height difference on the Escape versus the Supreme Escape. And here are the wing comparison profiles. Sorry, this was a little bit too high, but you can see the difference in the upper wing shape, whereas the lower wing shape is pretty similar, not exact, but has a really similar feel overall. Out to the field. I promised I would talk about the forehand. Now, I don't know if it was the plastic or the low profile. I leaned toward the low profile, but I felt very confident releasing this disc. That was one of the easiest 250-foot forehands I've ever thrown. And here, these stretched out to about 275, I think. I cleared the football, or the soccer field out there for me with the Supreme Escape. Just a really nice, easy throw for me. I'm sorry, that was the 250. This is the one that I pushed out a little bit farther. Apologies on that. But you can see the comparison of the flights. I was just getting a little bit cleaner releases for me. There was a little bit more confidence there. So again, it could have been placebo, but I was very confident in the feel of that disc releasing from my hand. Now to the backhand. Some examples. This is just a nice, easy pull, maybe 65, 70% out to 300 feet. Really nice and easy. This one I was trying to throw a hyzer, and this is where I learned that it's actually a really good hyzer flip disc. You can see it just kept going straight and cruised out there. So I adjusted a little more hyzer, a little bit more tilt to the shoulders, just held that line really nice. And this is just a harder throw. You'll see it turn over. There's a little bit of wind. You can see it dancing, but it gets out to 340-ish. And then this one is a little bit harder still with more hyzer. Again, that hyzer flips up nicely, and it will finish with that nice fade as well. Alright, so going to comparisons. This is the only shot of the Lucid-X you'll get in this video. Although it looks like the Lucid-X hangs out farther, that's because it was thrown hard and there was a little bit of gust of wind. The wing is going to dip much sooner. It's going to get to the ground faster overall. It was just way more overstable than really any of the other Escape line. And the Chameleon was kind of there as well. It's not as overstable as the Lucid-X, but you'll see the wing dip faster. It wants to get to the ground sooner. Even if the wind was buffeting it up a little bit, it just was much more overstable than the Supreme. Here's a lower power throw, and you'll get to see it too. Like, I threw the Chameleon flatter. It doesn't turn over at all. It just stays flat, and it starts to fade. Sorry, it disappears into the shadows here, but it fades a lot faster. Just a more overstable version in general. Here is a current run of Lucid. You're going to see both of these flip up. The Lucid is going to turn out just a little bit more. This is why I found this to be pretty consistent. I think the Supreme is just a little bit more overstable than the current run of Lucids, and that's what I talked about in the preview. Here is an intentional turnover of both. Apologies, the Lucid does disappear into the blue sky for just a second, but you'll see it come back down. Again, it's just a little bit more overstable. It's cutting a little bit sharper, whereas the Supreme panned a little bit better. That was why I thought the Supreme was a little bit more overstable. Here's the first run. Even with a little bit of extra tilt, you can see just again, that more overstable. Wing is dipping down faster. It wants to get to the ground a little bit faster. You'll get to see it again here. Both discs flip up. The Supreme turns out a little bit. The first run just stays on that line that you put it on, which is what the pre-Sweden Escapes were really good at, just holding the line. You can see the first run again is just a little more overstable. And then we go to the pre-Sweden Lucid, which is from the same run as the first run, but is more beaten in. It's been used. And you can see a more similar flight here. The Lucid is going to flip up a little bit, even turn some, but not quite as much as the Supreme. Here's another example of it. This is on a hyzer release. Both do flip up. The Supreme flips up sooner. Supreme disappears out of the screen. It'll come back. And you can see the Lucid is just going to track left much sooner and farther. I actually lost this disc for a full day in those weeds, but for comparison purposes, the flights are pretty similar. Now on the turnover, the forced turnover, the Lucid was thrown lower, but both of these discs are going to make it around the corner and up by the basket. You can just see the Supreme drifts really nicely. The Supreme honestly just drifts nicely in general. Here I thought was probably the closest comparison disc I had, although I gave it away, I think, after this throw. This throw took place before the next one. But very similar flights. Both of them flipped up, pan a little bit, and then a gentle fade on that low power throw. And then on this hyzer, again, both of them almost flip up to flat even with that hyzer release, and both of them come down on a similar angle. So the Supreme and the Fuzion I thought were very similar stabilities. Now to the Kona Panis Orbit. Intentional turnover here. This was a fun throw for me with both discs. Both of them want to get around the corner. The KP panned a little bit slower and actually hit the pin that's out there, whereas the Supreme was right of the pin, just turns a little bit more. Here you can see what I thought the Kona Panis does it really well, is just drifts right and then fades just slightly back, whereas the Supreme drifts a little bit slower. I thought the Orbit just had a little bit sharper S, turn faster, come back, whereas the Supreme panned more. Fairly similar stabilities overall, just a very slight difference in the shape of the S that they're going to fly on, if that makes sense. In review, the Supreme Escape is Dynamics' first release in the Supreme lineup, which will include the Trespass, the Escape, the Fugitive, and the Judge. This plastic is similar to the Royal Grand plastic, so it'll be nice and shiny and grippy and lots of glide to it. If you have any questions or comments, as always, please put it below so I can get back to you. And as always, thanks for watching. If you found this video informative, please feel free to like it, share it, or even subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching.